Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Late on Wednesday evening, the government announced the appointment of Lieutenant General Anil Chauhan, a former Eastern Army commander and a former Director General of Military Operations, as the new Chief of Defence Staff. So today we ask, what should we make of this announcement? Is it a wise choice or are there grounds for reservation? Joining me to answer those questions is the Strategic Affairs Editor of the Business Standard, Colonel Ajai Shukla. Colonel Shukla, before I talk to you specifically about General Chauhan, let me start with a wider question. Given the relations between the three services, when appointing the second Chief of Defence Staff, should the government have chosen an Air Force or a Navy officer rather than a second consecutive Army general?
That's a good question, Karan. And I would say that ideally one should choose, if in government one is choosing amongst a bunch of army commanders or top generals, one should choose the best man for the job rather than the senior most or the one who's been in service longer. But given the many dimensions of this new appointment, Chief of Defence Staff, there are other aspects that must be taken into account. There are military aspects, operational aspects, political aspects, even organizational aspects. And the organizational aspect is that from the perspective of the three services, the first Chief of Defence Staff was an Army officer, and therefore it is the turn of the Navy and the Air Force. If you want there to be buy-in from the Navy and the Air Force into this new concept, I think you have to give them their chance to have a general at the top. So I would say that this was the time to appoint a Navy or an Air Force Chief of Defence Staff, and that has not been done.
Okay. And do you think that is a major error on the part of the government or not?
Well, major is sort of a loaded word here in this case, but I certainly think it's an error on the part of the government. They should have, and especially Mr. Modi, who understands people and appointments and putting people in the right place, he should have realized that it was time to put a Navy or an Air Force officer on the top.
Okay, with that in the background, let's talk about General Chauhan specifically. Now, General Chauhan retired 16 months ago in May 2021, holding the rank of a Lieutenant General. Till his appointment as Chief of Defence Staff, he was in terms of rank, and I specify in terms of rank, junior to the present three serving chiefs. But now, as Chief of Defence Staff, he will be permanent chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, and therefore he will be senior to them. Could that cause problems?
I would be surprised if it caused a problem. First of all, I think amongst the top general cadre of the Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force, there is a realization that the Modi government tends to put the appointment of senior generals in terms of deep selection, which means that he goes down below the very top layer to the second layer and sometimes even the third layer of generals, as in this case, to select important appointments. So this has happened twice in the past, once in the case of General Rawat, once in the case of Admiral Karambir Singh, and there were no ill effects at that particular point. So I don't know if it will cause heartburn or, so to speak, the deep selection process. But I think seniority itself is not a problem or should not be a main criteria in the appointment of generals.
Let me put a second concern to you. After retiring from the army in May 2021, General Chauhan, in October of 2021, was appointed as the military advisor to the National Security Council, headed by Ajit Doval. Does that make his appointment as CDS political or questionable?
I don't know about whether it makes the appointment political or questionable, but I certainly think that it sends out the message, and this is a very worrying message, that being an advisor to the National Security Advisor, to Ajit Doval, is a more important job than being the Chief of Defence Staff. That's evident from the fact that because of Anil Chauhan's tenancy of the advisor to Doval post, the Chief of Defence Staff post has lain empty for 16 months, or for 9 months, I beg your pardon. So I think that is an unhealthy message to send. They should have first filled the appointment of Chief of Defence Staff and then look towards getting an officer, a suitable officer, to advise the National Security Advisor.
So you're saying that the fact that the Chief of Defence Staff post was kept empty for 9 months, during which period this gentleman, General Chauhan, was in fact the advisor to Mr. Doval, suggests that being advisor to Mr. Doval is more important. Otherwise, he should have been immediately appointed to CDS and not retained as advisor to Mr. Doval. That's the point you're making, isn't it?
Yes, and that's the message that this sends out to the environment in general, is that serving with the NSA is a greater priority than filling the Chief of Defence Staff appointment.
In that connection, then let me raise a further point, and it's one that's been made by others as well. General Chauhan is from Uttarakhand. So too was his predecessor, General Rawat. So too is the NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval. Do we therefore have grounds for suspecting, I won't go stronger than that, just grounds for suspecting that Mr. Doval is promoting people from his home state, or is that an unfair inference?
I find it hard to believe, or at least I don't want to believe, that there is nepotism at the level of the National Security Advisor and the Prime Minister. It's up to the civilian leadership, the top leadership of the country, to ensure that Caesar's wife is always above reproach. And I think in this particular case, they have kept themselves open to some allegations of the kind that you just voiced. And to that extent, they have, let me put it, not acted completely wisely. But at the same time, I would say that it's our job also to believe in the honesty, integrity, and impartiality of the national leadership. There are numerous cases every day of the week making appointments of people to top jobs. And if we sort of start looking at each one of these appointments with the eye of suspicion, the consequences will be just too great.
Now, there are also reports that as Army Commander, Eastern Command, which was the last job General Chauhan held before he retired from the army, he made a few political statements which many believe are unbecoming of a senior army officer. According to the Times of India, he applauded the government in 2019 for taking hard decisions and cited the Citizenship Amendment Act as one and the abrogation of Article 370 as another. Does that raise questions about his appointment as CDS?
I don't know about whether that qualifies or disqualifies him to become the CDS, but there is no question, Karan. Those statements should never have been made. I don't know whether it is because of a wish to ingratiate himself with the political leadership, but knowing him, I don't think that would be the case. I think that it is I would call it definitely a lack of judgment on his part. And when you're training generals to take up these top jobs, army commander, chief of defense staff, and so on, I think it's one of the flaws of the military education system that they do not train them to sort of choose their words carefully, to make statements after carefully judging the situation and judging whether their statement would be read as a political one or one that is ingratiating them with the government. So I think that those statements, there is no doubt, should not have been made. And I'm sure that there must have been some sort of soul searching within the army. But from the point of view of the chickens coming home to roost, this was always going to happen. You make a statement like that, and then you get posted to a new fancy appointment, and all those statements will get thrown back at you. And that's what's happening to General Chauhan.
So I'm right when I said that those statements are unbecoming of a senior army officer, particularly one in uniform.
I would not sort of use the word unbecoming of a senior army officer for the simple reason that it borrows the words almost sort of verbatim from Army Act Section 63, which is conduct unbecoming of an officer. So, I mean, that's more for officers and so on. This would just be, I would say, a case of political misjudgment and sort of misjudgment of his words as a senior ranking officer.
Now, you have dealt with General Chauhan in your capacity as Strategic Affairs Editor to the Business Standard, particularly on issues to do with China, and I believe in particular the eastern border with China. What impression did you form of his knowledge and expertise?
I sort of dealt with him in the context. I think we should put the context clear. I was asked to give a talk at the Tollygunge Club in Calcutta to the club members. And being a sort of a notable citizen of Fort William, the army commander, General Anil Chauhan, was also invited. And after the talk, after the question and answer session, I went to him and asked him a couple of questions on issues that I genuinely had questions over. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by how deep his knowledge of the border issue was. I would go so far as to say I have never had a discussion as enlightening and as deep in the issues of border policy as I had with General Anil Chauhan. So I have to say that in that aspect, in being qualified for the job, he was very qualified as a corps commander in Tezpur, as an army commander in Calcutta, and now I assume the same qualifications will serve him in good stead as Chief of Defense Staff.
Tell me something else. How well equipped is General Chauhan in furthering jointness between the three services, which is perhaps his main responsibility now that he becomes CDS?
Yes, and I have to say, to the best of my knowledge, he has not tenanted a tri-service appointment. And this is a problem with most of the generals of the Indian Army. Tri-service sort of qualifications give you nothing in terms of ammunition to get promoted up the chain. And you have just a handful of generals who would have dealt with Navy and Air Force issues. So in that aspect, I think that General Chauhan may not be the sort of the best choice in terms of experience in dealing with tri-service issues. But then, so too can be said about many generals in the Indian Army. And we need to have an institutional effort in place to make sure that going up the chain requires you to tenant tri-service appointments so that you have some experience of what to do when you're at the top.
Let me then end this interview by repeating the question I raised in my introduction. Is the appointment of General Chauhan as CDS a good one, or are there a few questions that you believe still need to be answered before you can give a final answer?
It is possibly one of the better choices that could have been made, but I would put to you, Karan, the simple fact that in the military, and certainly at the very top levels at which General Chauhan works, you very often do not have experience of the job into which you are posted. You learn on the job. You are sort of over the a period of time, you deal with the documents and the files and the policies that have to do with that job, and then you gradually, I would even say, you grow into the job. So I would say General Chauhan may not have all the qualifications at this point in time, but I don't think there is any evidence to suggest that he was incapable of growing into the job. Quite the contrary. He's an officer of intelligence, experience, integrity. I think this political sort of misstep in Assam might be the one thing that could be held against him. And I wish him well. I think that he's tenanting the single most important appointment in the military, and we have to wish him well.
You mentioned a political misstep in Assam. What are you referring to?
I'm referring to the point that you had raised, in which he had applauded the government and so on.
That was as Army Commander, Eastern Command.
That's right.
So let me then sum up what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong. You believe it is possibly one of the better choices that could have been made. But you also said earlier that his association with Ajit Doval as the National Security Council's military advisor before he became CDS, and the delay as a result of him becoming CDS, sends out what you called a worrying message. And you also said that as Army Commander, Eastern Command, when he made those political statements about CAA and the abrogation of Article 370, he showed lack of judgment. Is that a correct summing up?
That's absolutely right.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Karan.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.